Hello, good evening, and happy Friday. We're coming to you live with episode 15 of our weekly album discussion streams. I'm Matt, and tonight I'm joined by Brad,
Hello.
and we've got a crystal clear Cam with us too.
Hopefully. Hello, how you doing?
All good. Yeah, together we are Ballpark Music, and every week we pick an album that came out on a previous week, give ourselves 7 days with it, then come back together on a stream for an in-depth discussion. No scoring, no taste making, because music is not sports. If you like what you see, give us a follow on the socials, and we'll let you know when we're going live. Hoo boy! That didn't last long. There he is.
That was my bad. I knocked my USB out. Cam out. We got a minute in, boys. We're doing better than last week.
Shake it out. Shake it out. Like you say, last week I started our stream by saying we're back. We're better than ever. But I think from that point on, right, we can say that with a little more confidence tonight, right? Shrugs of shoulders. We look good.
I lost my mouse. It's you're right. We're just getting it all out of the way now, getting all the early technical shit done, and we'll be good for the rest of it. I mean, yeah, I've got my mouse in position over the mute thing, so that won't happen again. I'm staying well away from the USB, which next week is going to be in the back of my computer and not the front, as per what Brad told me in the week, which I didn't do. We're all good. All right, I'm gonna shut up.
Well, look, you're in sync. We can see you. We can hear you. It's all an improvement. It's all an improvement. And thanks so much for sticking with us through our technical woes last week. We do greatly appreciate it. Each passing week, we learn more and more. And in some cases, we learn more and more in the first 5 to 10 minutes of our stream. Guys, I did something today that I haven't done in a while. I went to London. I saw the Big Smoke, and
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
I tell you what, after however many months of being locked inside and everything like that, it's a bit sensory overload.
Yeah, I find that with London at the best of times, so I can't imagine like going there now would be way too much to deal with. Way too much.
I could taste it as soon as I got off the train. I could taste London. But no, it was nice to be out of the house. Nice to go and visit. Yes, even London on a day like today.
It's a lie. It's never nice to be out of the house.
No, it's all good. It's all good, man. It sounds like you're bringing the rest of you're bringing outside to inside your house, right? I think I heard some seagulls going off there.
I live by the coast. It's just part of what happens here. I got woken up by them this morning at 6 a.m. Anyone that's ever lived in a seaside town will tell you that those things should not be protected and they should be hurt every morning. But I say that as a vegetarian, But those things suck.
Brad, do you have strong feelings on seagulls?
No, but I have been woken up twice this week by my cat bringing in a live bird. So maybe just all birds.
So, like, are they live by the point they reach you?
I think they're just about live when they make it into the house, and then very shortly after.
Birds aren't real. Don't lie. It's a government conspiracy.
It's why we all got locked in last year. They had to change the batteries.
Exactly.
Come on, people. I'm gonna get us off this tangent. Gents, what are you drinking tonight?
Same thing we drink every week now. Hard seltzer. We're hard seltzer people. I bet you two are drinking hard seltzer as well.
Brad, what are you drinking?
I'm not. I've gone back to a classic, and I'm on Birra Moretti this week.
Well, yeah, Cam, I hate to disappoint, but I've got beer here. I've got beer, but you're right. I am actually right now drinking hard seltzer. If only to point out that I'm still drinking Topo Chico, because it maybe wasn't as good as I initially thought it was on this stream this time last week.
other hard seltzers are available. We don't have some kind of a deal. That'd be good. We should try and get a deal with Topo Chico.
I was just saying, don't get a deal with Topo Chico. It's wank,
Why?
man.
Is it that bad?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I've still got some of it left a week later.
Let's
Well,
get a
there
deal
goes the
with.
deal.
Yeah. Oh, you just ruined that now. They're never going to sponsor us. That's why we drink Mike's hard seltzer.
Ooh.
That's the one we want.
I could do a Mike's hard seltzer. I could definitely
Okay.
do a Mike's hard seltzer. Hey, well, I tell you what, why don't we move on to tonight's album discussion? And tonight we have got Hobo Johnson's latest release, The Revenge of Hobo Johnson, on the docket. And yes, that's even though it came out on a Wednesday. Here are some excerpts from an article about the album to set the scene. Hobo Johnson returns with his iconic spoken word, dynamic music, and an ability to communicate the many problems of modern life. On the strength of his two previous projects, The Rise of Hobo Johnson and The Fall of Hobo Johnson, real name Frank Lopez Jr., seemed to become an artist millions of people resonated with, his heart on his sleeve and his self-effacing lyricism winning hearts all over the world. Then suddenly, he was gone. Now he's released his new project titled The Revenge of Hobo Johnson. Speaking about the album, he cites Karl Marx and the progressive thought as inspiration on this project. Quote, "My last record, The Fall of Hobo Johnson, was my first time working with a major label to release my music. It was not for me. I decided my next record needed to be entirely under my control. After converting our band into a democratic and egalitarian institution, we created The Revenge." He adds, quote, "The record reflects many aspects of this newfound ideology, and that really excites me. With the popularity of Bernie Sanders and AOC, it seems as though leftist ideology is creeping back into mainstream thought. I hope to help this perspective gain eyes and ears." Yeah, so a lot of people know Hobo Johnson back in 2018, which feels like 30 years ago now. Rather than 3. He and his band, the Lovemakers, recorded a video performing his track Peach Scone for an entry to NPR's annual Tiny Desk concert contest. The phrase is overused, but there's no arguing the video went viral, right? Millions of views were racked up overnight, and the unknown artist from Sacramento went from recording albums in the 94 Corolla he was living in to signing with Warner and an overnight international sensation. Hobo Johnson and the Lovemakers did get their slot on Bob Boilin's Tiny Desk series on YouTube despite not winning the contest, and Peach Scone is now sitting at my last count around 21 million views on YouTube. So guys, Homeless Johnson, have you heard his music before?
Did you just call him Homeless Johnson?
Yeah, you got to give him his full name every now and then.
Okay.
I go by Matt. I go by Matthew.
Right. That caught me off guard. What did you ask? Sorry.
Have you heard Hobo Johnson's music before?
Yes. I have. I've seen that Tiny Desk. I've listened to his last album in full. And I have been thus far left deeply unimpressed with the work of Hobo Johnson. But that's just one guy's opinion. So,
Brad, how about you?
Yeah, I think I saw the Tiny Desk. It was either the competition video or part of the actual Tiny Desk that he did. Memorable. It's not a guy you're going to forget. But that's pretty much the only exposure. I never dug any deeper from there.
Well, I am, and I'm going to get this out the way early, an unabashed fan of Hobo Johnson. I, like many, came across Peach Scone by chance and immediately needed more. Cracked open his first album, The Rise of Hobo Johnson, and it was pure raw emotion that came out of it and punched me right in the gut. But I was hooked, right? I know you guys have seen the Tiny Desk, but honestly, if anyone listening to this hasn't yet, stick it on. If you're with us on Twitch, I promise we won't say anything interesting for the next 15 minutes. And if you're watching with us on YouTube, then pause now and come back for 15 minutes of really, really interesting discussion.
You can probably extend that to we're not going to say anything interesting for the next 2 hours, but there you go.
Hey, man, you can speak for yourself. It's fine. But yeah, look, that performance sums up everything I love about his music. It's just unfiltered writing about himself and his relationships that I could only ever dream of writing myself. There's simple concepts on the face of it that are wrapped in layers of meaning and honesty. There's a YouTube comment that goes something along the lines of this is a man who remembers why he wrote the song every damn time he performs it. And it's true. I saw his album release show at Banquet when he released his last album, The Fall of Hobo Johnson. And boy, it was genuinely one of my favorite gigs I've been at, full stop. And it went some way, I think, to making up for an album that I didn't enjoy to the same extent as others. Like, a lot of fans do tend to hail Fall as his best release. I think Rise was much better, but that is one guy's opinion. What's up, Charazula? Good to see you in chat. Saying solid sale, guys. Thanks. But yeah, I think it's just important to lay out some context here real quick. There is, as we've mentioned, a lot that's happened between Fall and Revenge. Franks severed his ties with Warner after releasing just one album on that label. His first album was re-released after he signed. He has withdrawn from social media and seems to be taking a broader view than in the past. I was really excited to hear that this was coming out, but to be honest, I will put on any new Hobo Johnson music whenever it comes out. And hey, I know we've got some differing viewpoints on his past work, but I am very glad to be sharing it with you guys this week.
You say that now. You don't know what we thought, yeah.
No, I don't, but I would still say it confidently. I would still say
Okay.
it very confidently because I know how
Yeah.
I felt about this album, and whatever you say won't change that. So
That's the way it should be always, as a
Exactly.
reminder for everything I'm about to say. If you do love Hobo Johnson, I don't mean any slight against anyone at all. But you know,
That's,
some things for some people and some people for others. So
Oh no,
Yeah.
you didn't put that warning before Van Weezer. Panic. Panic
Is
stations.
that a spoiler alert?
no, not a spoiler alert. But I just want to make sure, because sometimes you have to be honest. You have to say the way you feel about a record and an artist. And I don't ever want that to be at the detriment of somebody else's enjoyment of that artist or that record. Like, for example, I think Father of All is one of the worst albums I've ever heard in my life. But if you love it, that's cool, and I respect that. So I just wanted to get that's the kind of thing we're doing here, right? You know, we're not like, we've got to give our opinion. You've got to be honest, but it's not sports. We're not here to like say you're an awful human being if you like Hobo Johnson. So
I have heard no scoring, no taste making is perhaps the reasoning that music is not sports. I think some very smart people have said that, so we should listen to them. They sound about right on this.
I agree.
Good stuff. Right. So as I set up all of my timers and everything, let's move into the track by track discussion. And we will kick off with Anton LaVey. And that opens the album up. How are you guys with your history of the Church of Satan?
I've watched the Church of Satan documentary on Netflix, and I used to be in a black metal band, but that's about as far as it goes.
I'm 50% of the way with you there, Cam. I have not watched the documentary.
No, I have not watched the documentary, but you knew who Anton LaVey was coming into this, at least, then I guess, right?
Yeah, vaguely. He wrote the Bible of Satan or whatever it was, the Satanic Bible. Yeah, that's the Satanic Bible. That's about it. Never read it. Never took much interest in it. That documentary is really good though.
Good. Have to check it out. And yeah, so little bit of a an off-kilter way, I think, to start the album off in terms of Hobo Johnson's back catalog. A lot of his music has been very personal. It's not often that he replaces the subject in his songs with somebody else, but instead here, the subject of his song is Anton LaVey, as we've said, the founder of the Church of Satan and Satanism. And I think in terms of a musical introduction to Hobo Johnson, on the other hand, it's about as good a start as you can get, right? You've got catchy hooks, you've got false starts, you've got false endings, you've got flying off in tangents in a way that seems designed to only mess up the structure of the song. Like most artists probably would have ended this song after at about the 3-minute mark, before the song gets a real porno vibe and the subject has some Netflix and chill with Satan. But hey, let's come to that in a minute here. What were your first impressions here, Brad, of Hobo Johnson?
Yeah, so obviously seeing the tiny desk, I kind of expected the kind of vocal delivery we're presented with straight away. Room with, I've written down bad acoustic guitar, but it's kind of a deliberately bad. It's like a drunk kind of feel. Nice fat groove, cool drum sound. Obviously, like the hip hop influence coming through, and filled out with some nice like sax and brass riffs as well. Cacophony, I think, starts to kind of creep in. Is how I describe the sound. Especially in the backing vocals, we always seem to talk about on the stream these days is backing vocals, but yeah, it's a really massive like cacophonous sound. It sounds like there's hundreds of them, in that kind of gang chanty way. Interestingly, you said in the album release, dynamic is mentioned. I think that's like quite obvious straight away. There's going to be lots of massive dynamic shifts in here. Yeah, and then there's a different song halfway through this song. Like you said, the porno vibe, it's kind of indescribable as anything other than that. Yeah, some cool effects. Fairly simple progression apart from the part where there's a different song in there. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
What are you thinking here, Cam?
Yeah, much like Brad's, quite a staccato, kind of off-kilter intro. The acoustic guitar I found it quite interesting. It kind of almost sounds out of tune. Brad got it spot on. Like kind of that lazy, sloppy, drunk house party vibe where some guy whips out the acoustic guitar and suddenly we're listening to Wonderwall. It's that kind of vibe. Sounds a little off, but not quite. And you've got this like cool thing in the chorus where it's got this almost like two-part thing where part A is bigger and then it mutes and kind of comes down for part B, which is nice, and the song structure is all very nice. Feels quite stop-start until the second verse, and then you get the kind of chant vocals and backing vocals that Brad sort of talked about. And they're very prominent. They're giving you a hint of what's to come later on the album because there's a lot of them. They're all slightly off the main vocal as well, which kind of gives this loose feel and vibe. All of it 90s indie instrumental for me. Where this song falls down massively for me is with Frank himself. There's something I said this to you in the week. There's something about his voice that is just absolute Marmite to me, and I think you're either gonna like it or absolutely hate it. It feels very exaggerated. It's very kind of pronounced spoken word. And in a lot of ways, it feels quite high school poetry slam. That's never more prominent than the selection. Sorry, let me try that again. The section about halal and loose meat, where he's kind of doing that triple rhyme thing, or that repeating the word 3 times kind of thing. It's, for me, it grates a little bit. It kind of feels like it's trying to be deeper than it is. I don't know. I can't really say that because I don't know the guy. I don't know what his kind of background is or what his, but that's the way it comes across to me. Is it's trying to be like a really deep spoken word piece, and it just comes across like a lot of the time it came from like rhymezone.com or something like that, because every song on this album has a double it has a rhyming couplet, like each one. I got stopped counting them in the end because every single one was the same. So you know, people use that tool, it's fine. But it just was really obvious in a lot of ways for me. Having said that, the music is really nice. I think I just don't vibe with him or his kind of personality that he's bringing across on the song.
I think, you know, points you make about you know, his voice, it's interesting, and there has been a lot of discussion about this in relation to this album in particular. I want to hit on that just in a little bit here, in a bit more detail. You know, the delivery and things, like, I think there is probably a very I don't think there's many people who would disagree with you about him, you know, bringing that high school slam poetry type vibe along with him. I think a lot of that is him. I think a lot of that is his vibe. I think that's something that he has been doing for a long time. He does pack a lot of emotion into it, even if it's not deep. And it's interesting. So he does a lot of tongue-in-cheek songs. I think this is deeper than some of his tongue-in-cheek songs that he's done previously. You know, we deal with a lot more darker and on-the-nose themes in this album than we maybe have done on some of his more personal writings. Again, this is going to come out all throughout the discussion tonight. But yeah, the weird thing is, like, as strange as this song maybe is, it still feels restrained by Hobo Johnson standards, in terms of the weird, at least. This is a guy who breaks down the fourth wall of music to introduce himself on like 3 or 4 separate occasions, back on his, well, second album, Rise. He's never had much time for like the done thing when it comes to music, and yet Anton LaVey is still one of the most kind of out there tracks on this album. I think by the time you get to the end of the 10 songs that we've got here, maybe, you know, if you forget about a couple towards the end, but anyway, so it's interesting that he chose to open with this, I think, and, you know, you're set up for maybe a little bit of a different album than you end up getting into if you know Hobo Johnson or if you don't know Hobo Johnson.
I can't lie, because I think I listened to his last album twice on the back of the recommendation from you, and obviously it wasn't my thing. I thought, okay, maybe it's just a first time listen. It just didn't really catch the ear. I'll give it a second listen, and I don't feel that this album at all was in any way what I wasn't expecting from this album, if you know what I mean. Some of the instrumentation's interesting and nice, and I think his band's really good. But as far as he goes, and this probably come from someone that doesn't know him as well as you do, it doesn't come across as anything I wasn't expecting. Which reading around the album's a disappointing thing, because I've seen a lot of diehard Hobo Johnson fans say that this is a horrible album, this is the worst one yet. So I was expecting to actually maybe, oh, okay, maybe he's done something that I might enjoy, because obviously me and those people have a very different taste in music. So yeah, I can't say it was anything other than what I was expecting.
Folks, we are getting a little notification here that Twitch is currently experiencing issues with going live. If you're with us in chat, maybe just give us a shout. Make sure that you are able to see us. I'm not sure, based on the notification that I've got, whether this is a global issue or one with just our stream. What's up, Lala Kukalala? Thanks for keeping us in the zone. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, I'm on stream, Matt. We're good. I'll keep an eye on that.
Sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, I was just going to say I didn't really have much expectation coming in. I will say this song has been a bit of an earworm all week, and especially that kind of chorus bit is incredibly catchy, and it has kind of I find myself like humming it and being like, "What the fuck?" So yeah, incredibly catchy stuff in there.
If I've taken one thing away from this album, it is closing my eyes, glad that I'm dead. Na 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 na. This heaven is weird. My Jesus is
I
red.
wouldn't disagree with you, but it's not him I find catchy from that part. It's his band again. I find his band in that section to be really catchy, and I've been humming the melody that they're kind of singing. I yeah, I think that bit is the real style. He works with some talented musicians, no doubt. You can hear that throughout some good songwriters.
We get a lot of good from the Lovemakers across this album. So let's move on to our second track. I want to see the world. Excuse me. And yeah, so this song was the first single released off the album. I think it was less than a month before the record's actual release. Which I think we've learned recently is not the done way to do an album anyway. But, Hobo Johnson's pulling on something a little different than we are here. But yeah, one thing I want to cover off, and Cam, you mentioned this sort of tangentially, I think, on the first track. Frank's voice sounds actually pretty different on this album. It's one of those things that's almost eerie, like it's close, but you can't quite put your finger on what's different. But you know that the sound of his voice is different compared to anything off of Fall or Rise. My first impression when I came away from this single was like, there's something different here. There's something going on. It's like almost a little higher pitch than anything I'd heard him do before. He did reference this on Twitter after the single came out, suggested that this is actually what his voice sounds like. It's just that Fall and Rise were recorded following some relentless touring. But with this album being recorded during lockdown, it was fully recovered by the time he was putting tracks down. I got used to it. I found it less noticeable elsewhere. But I know a lot of people found it grating who were fans of his previous work. And yeah, Cam, you found it grating anyway.
I am not gonna lie to you. The thing I have written down here is that it sounds like Morty from Rick and Morty is doing vocals on this song in particular. Um, it it sounded like a parody to me. I can't. I honestly thought it might have been a joke. I don't know if it was or not. Still to this point with that delivery. I don't know if he was trying to do some kind of like ironic thing with what he was trying to do with the theme of the song or not, but yeah, it didn't sound like a guy doing proper serious vocal takes. It sounded like a guy kind of messing around in the studio doing an impression of Morty from Rick and Morty.
Let me just say, I think a lot of the beats that he's hitting, and so like, a lot of the like, I want to see the world, like holding that stuff out, especially France. That's things that he's done before, and like a lot of the like strain and things is there. I think the thing that has sounded different, particularly as I say, was the pitching. A lot of people have suggested if you go back to his first album, 94 Corolla, which was recorded in a 94 Corolla, that was prior to when he was touring and things like that. His voice sounds very similar to this track. So I am inclined to kind of believe that it's just like, hey, this is just what my fully recovered voice sounds like, type thing.
Oh, gee, Rick, I want to see the world. That's all I could think every time I heard this song. You know what, actually, just going to the music a second, the acoustic guitar actually reminded me a lot of the beat for My Name Is by Eminem. I don't know if you go back and listen to it now. It's very similar. It's got that very kind of dun, dun, that kind of, you know what I mean. Very repetitive and serves the song quite well in this regard. It never really changes up, but it never really needs to. The vocals are clearly the main aspect and driver of this song. I touched on the vocals. I just want to touch on the lyrics. I feel like he's trying to make a comment on American imperialism. Sorry if you heard that cargo bus. I'm thinking like he's trying to make a comment on American imperialism without actually saying anything at all. It's detailing and listing a lot of events and then saying, "Oh, the world is awful," but it just doesn't have any kind of like weight to it. And I don't necessarily sit here and think, well, he doesn't have that in him, but it just all feels a little surface level and I am not the person, and never will be, to accuse someone of virtue signaling or anything like that. But it definitely feels like he's just listing off a bunch of events to say, oh, oh, this is so bad. Look at my knowledge, kind of thing. And I found it quite crass in a lot of ways, especially
So
some of the events he references.
so what did you think of the transition, the comparison between him in the first verse and him later on in the song when he is referencing those things, right? Because that's what I found interesting about the lyrics on this song, because he starts off by talking about a very idealized, very vapid type of view of the world, right? So, like, he talks about food initially as being a defining feature for visiting countries. And then he drops into talking about visiting Normandy to respect the troops. And I think, again, Hobo Johnson's previous work, where he has at times spoken about police brutality. This is not the first time he's raged against American imperialism by any stretch of the imagination. He's never done it to the extent he does on this album. But anyway, he talks about going to Ground Zero to salute the fallen heroes. It sets you up differently, I think. And then you get the switch that comes. I think that's the interesting part for me about this song.
For me, I'd have no problem with that, and that's fine. I get the setup, but what are you really trying to say other than that we've done this lots of times? When you're just listing off events like, oh, I want to go to Auschwitz to comprehend how God could let this happen to them, or we meddled in their election several different times. It's like, well, okay, you've hit on a theme here. Maybe you want to explore that a little bit more. You want to actually get some depth in that, because at the moment all you're doing is acknowledging that you know that those things are things. You're not actually giving me any information. You're not giving any critical evaluation on that. You're just saying, oh, the world is bad, these things exist, which for me just feels hollow. um, and I can't get around that in this song. Really, it feels like a guy that wants to try and say something, but doesn't quite know how.
I,
Um,
I as I say, I think I Want to See the World is about stripping away the veneer and actually looking. I would suggest. It's about saying that, yes, there's a lot of great things in the world, but it is also a fucked place. Sorry, Brad. I am very conscious that we haven't let you get a word in edgeways. So what do you think about I Want to See the World, and indeed this issue in particular?
Yeah, so I would say it kind of fits with the vocal delivery. Like, it is kind of almost a childlike vocal delivery. The way he kind of pauses on world, the fact that it is slightly higher pitched, it does feel like it's kind of a deliberate, like it's putting across some kind of naivety there, or like you said, a vapid view of it. Kind of all feels like a collection of a travel Instagrammers stories that start to kind of go awry as it goes on. You get the typical, like, lots of shots about food and boring tourist attractions, but it's still kind of broken down into those like short little kind of chunks. So yeah, I do get what you're saying, Matt. I also get what you're saying, Cameron. I don't think it really explores that much deeper into them to make a comment other than kind of listing. But I think from that kind of naive, almost childlike view of it that we get at the start, it kind of makes sense that it is just gonna kind of peel back, like you say, Matt, the veneer of like the Instagram travel story.
I think my problem with it is that he's not a child, and he clearly wants to say something, so say it, and like say it with your whole chest, kind of thing. I don't really get what this song is actually trying to tell me. It feels like it's trying to make an intelligent comment without actually really ever committing to it, which I find a little bit, just for me personally, just find a little bit disingenuous and grating. When I'm trying to listen to a song, it's like, okay, cool. I probably agree with you on a lot of these issues. I'm probably fully behind you, but actually say something with worth. You've got a platform. You've got a stage. Use it, kind of thing. Rather than just, I don't know. It just feels wishy washy. at best for me, and I think that's the main issue. But maybe you're right. Maybe he was just trying to say, look, an Instagram kind of comment kind of thing on that kind of social media. Oh, I want to see the world. I'm going to take pictures of food, but there's actually all these imperialist horrors going on everywhere. It's not the way it came across to me, but you might be well and true on that.
So I think just to build very quickly on what you're saying, Brad, about the sort of naivety aspect, I think one important part that this song plays in the wider album is that this is really his introduction to I am going to talk about things other than me on an album, right? So I've said there have been songs on his first two albums where he has mentioned issues like imperialism, police brutality. He did a whole skit about cockroaches, and it was about politicians and nuclear war on his last album too. But he's never dealt with a worldview, I think, in the way that he does on this album. So, there is an element of this is a transition. This is an element of setting up some lyrical themes, I think, that are, fairly common throughout the rest of the album here, and what we're going to be talking about. But anyway, on that note, let's move on to I Want You Back. And Cam, what are you thinking here?
Caught me mid-drink. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, the beats he works with are very spare, with not a lot going on a lot of the time. And with I Want You Back, with this kind of repetitive beat going off again, with kind of a synth chiming off in the background. Wasn't sure if it was a synth or something similar. Most of the space is taken up by drums and vocals, though. Again, we're kind of back to this rambling, I'm gonna call it rhymezone.com lyrics. And that kind of word vomit thing he's pulling off. I don't really again understand the narrative. I again, it feels like every time he's about to say something clever about depression, I really feel like he's on the verge of it. It kind of turns and becomes kind of almost a little bit more cliche, or a kind of high school way of expressing it. I didn't, listening to this, think of it as a, it's supposed to be a portrayal of naivety, so maybe that would slant my view on it, like Brad's just said. Because a lot of the things I've written about it, it sounds like a high schooler's expressing it, and maybe I'm 10 years too old to be enjoying this album or whatever, but in that regard, but yeah, that's the way it came across to me, especially when he's sort of talking about social media. I again, I just, because these are a lot of things I agree with. I like I said, I have these kind of thoughts and feelings myself a lot of the time, and I would really like him to go into depth on them and actually, write something really meaningful. And I just always feel like he's kind of holding a lot back. I don't know. Maybe I'm scratching the surface enough, or I don't know enough about him to really get it or see that that's coming across. But it just feels like something's held back.
Brad, how about you? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, so I would agree with you on the musical elements. I think it kind of settles into kind of a fairly consistent form at this part, the way things kind of build and then drop back. I think it's interesting the way that the themes kind of develop, but then we always get dropped back to that like very simple kind of like chord progression, normally with just guitar and vocals. Even as the themes develop, I think that's quite an interesting contrast to like take you right back to the beginning of the song, but with like a new kind of lyrical look on it. I think there are a lot of things in here that are fairly relatable. I think the chimey thing you're mentioning as well, I think is pitch shifted guitar. I think that's what it is, because I think there's a part where it kind of drops back down and is then unpitch shifted later on, possibly. But yeah, like I was saying, there's plenty of stuff in here you can relate to. The stuff on social media kind of, to me, is reminiscent of kind of the early commentaries we started to get on social media in music. It feels like people have been doing that for a long time now, and maybe that could evolve a bit more here.
So yeah, this is, I think, musically another example of a like classic Hobo Johnson song, I think, in that regard, right? You have mentioned it already, Cam, but the Love Makers are such a great accompaniment. Like every single time, it's super catchy. It's bouncy in the right places. It's pulled back in other places. I think the opening verse of this track is going to go down a treat live. And, I think one thing on the lyrics, to me, we get the first overt allusions here to Frank's journey since signing with a label, and talking about, and the trappings of fame as well, which he's spoken about at length in interviews before. His talk about making $1 million and how he then had to spend it all on therapy may well fall on deaf ears. But within the context of his back catalog, it is really quite depressing. The Rise of Hobo Johnson has a number of tracks dedicated to his dream of getting signed and making it big. 3% Chance in particular is very heartfelt. And I think what hits so hard about some of these lines is that back on The Rise, he just wanted to make money so he could buy his mom a house and visit her every day. Fast forward to I Want You Back, he's left the label you could have only dreamed of and is lamenting the experience, right? And I do note that we don't have any references to his mom and dad on this album. They were more sporadic on Fall than they were on Rise. But Rise, pretty much every song is about his relationship with his parents because, in his early years, and he's open about this, that very much defined him as a person and his development and how he grew up and things. But yeah, I almost wonder on that note whether the silence is saying something a little bit more here, and that in itself has its own weight in some of these songs. And again, the only thing that I'm going to say on the social media aspect that you've both spoken to is that we have heard lines like this from other artists before, but I think it's very visceral coming from a man who's been churned by the music industry scene, number one, and is now mostly off social media as a result of some experiences at the beginning of last year. So, it again just adds to the weight, I think, of those lines somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say because obviously I don't know that. I think from my point of view, I just kind of want a little bit more nuanced with it. And maybe that's not his style. And maybe that's why it's not for me, because I want a little bit more nuance with those kind of things. I think I've said this to you before when we're writing our own stuff. Like, it's too on the nose kind of thing. Let's try and find a better way to say that. And he never really does. He just kind of, it is like word vomit, which is a style and a perfectly legitimate style and a perfectly valid style. I just feel like if you're going to try and say these things that have already been said 1,000 times before, maybe try and find a new, a better way to say them. But then again, maybe, I'm wrong and you should just say them the way that you feel them. So there's no real right answer here. I think just for me, I want a little bit more nuance. Sorry, Brad, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think maybe as someone who doesn't follow Hobo Johnson at all, that maybe some of that nuance is missed. Some of the stuff that ties in with the earlier albums, like I would have, I knew nothing about him before this, so I guess if he's...
I can't expect everyone that's listening to your album to have listened to your back catalogue before, though. Do you know what I mean?
No,
I feel like
know.
you've got to kind of leave it a little bit more.
But you don't have to. You don't have to write for people in a different way because of that, right? You should make your music. Yeah. And if you go back to, say what you mean and say it like that, if you don't subscribe to that, then you're not going to enjoy Hobo Johnson. It's as simple as that, because that's what he does. And for me, that's the appeal. And I think, for other people, it is certainly a little more frustrating, or it can be off-putting or things like that. But I really enjoy it. It is his style, as I say, especially when it's the word vomit and things like that. For me, those elements really add to the honesty. They make me far more invested in him as an artist than somebody who is, utilizing a thesaurus in a certain way. I want to hear honest stories. I get that from Hobo Johnson. There's no, as I say, there's no veneer. There is no coating around that I have to break through to try and get at. This is what the person actually is, or anything like that. I know what it is, and I can feel his emotions. I think a lot of the times.
My counter, well, not my counter to that. I'm not going to try and counter whether you like Hobo Johnson. My feelings on that are that that's fine. I think for most cases, if you're in a band and the lyrics aren't the major part, but for what he does, his lyrics are the upfront center part.
I think you're misunderstanding.
I
I just want to say I think you're misunderstanding what I am saying, because I'm saying that
No, I'm not misunderstanding what you're saying.
because I think they add to the weight of those lyrics.
No, yeah, I mean, sorry, yeah, what I was going on to say, other than that, is that I don't feel like these are particular to one person. They feel quite generic in that way to me. Like anybody could have written these. They don't feel very personal in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say he's inauthentic or anything like that, but they do just feel like standard kind of. This is what you would write if you were writing a. I'm not going to say 5-minute song about social media, but if you were writing a song about social media, these might be some of the first things that come to your head, kind of thing. And again, that's probably down to me not knowing him, and you knowing him better that you feel that way. But that's the way it comes across to someone that isn't sort of closely tied to his work.
Yeah, I don't think you can expect an artist like this though to then try to make things accessible by making them kind of more generic. I think, like you say, Matt, it is kind of his experience, and from what you said about his previous albums, there's a lot of stuff talking about him, and you get invested in him as a character or him as a person. So I don't think you can then expect him on his third album to then make everything really accessible and really generic and stuff that's going to have deep meanings if you've not listened to the back catalogue. So
Maybe so.
Right. So, I'm just conscious about the amount of time we are spending per track here. So I'm going to move us on to My Therapist. And yeah, we were told that Revenge featured a lot of songs that were inspired by Marx, by Bernie Sanders, and AOC. So yeah, as we reach My Therapist, Brad, what are you thinking here?
so straight away we're in with like another kind of deadpan delivery here. Similar kind of form that we've become accustomed to. I think it's pretty simple, pretty effective. It builds the same way as the previous tracks, and as a platform to kind of launch his kind of diatribe or his kind of stream of consciousness. I think that works pretty effectively. So there's some interesting kind of use of space going on in here, especially with like some of the whispered kind of backing vocals. Some of the panning's really interesting. Interesting use of space between the drums and the guitar. You've got the hats panned hard right and the guitars panned hard left. It just creates this like kind of slightly off kilter, off balance kind of feel in general. So musically, yeah, it's more of the same. But like I said, it's a good platform to launch the stream of consciousness from.
I think what's striking to me musically is that there have been tracks like this on Hobo Johnson records in the past that would have been set to, I think, a little more tongue-in-cheek, or I don't think lighthearted is maybe the right way to say it, but it's been set to different subject matter in the past. You can tell he's got a different goal on this album at this point. Anyway, here.
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Brad said, really. There's a lot of kind of repetitive ideas on this album, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I kind of see it as a loose hip hop album, loose hip hop inspired sort of thing. So we've kind of had this slow, sludgy acoustic guitar intro, guitar, sorry. intro 3 times already, and he brings it back here. Getting more gang vocals, again slightly off the main vocals, give it that really loose feeling with those whispered vocals again, kind of giving that loose kind of rambling feeling. I'm not really sure I understand the kind of ramblings, again the lyrics of the chord, but I think that's me. I think I'd need more time because there's quite a lot of ideas that he plays around with here that I didn't have a lot of time to explore. So I'm not going to criticize those anyway, because it just purely I just didn't have a lot of time to really delve into the soap and the pizza place. My one, this song mostly passes me by. The one negative I have from this song is the line, wouldn't everybody not see they should buy their pies from me, you'd rather have a boss. I just really don't like the delivery there. I get what he's trying to do, but it's quite screeching. It's quite aggressively in your face. And I really just wanted to ask you if you enjoyed that particular section, what you thought about that particular section, because I wasn't sure if he'd done something different. They hadn't really done that to that extent on the album, or if he'd done that kind of thing before, and that was kind of part of what he does, or if that's a new thing he's trying. It's just not really come off there.
No, so that is something that he has utilized in the past. He does on a number of songs throughout his last few albums, do a lot of very, strained, a lot of very, emotive and, unhinged, I think, to some extent. Vocal delivery on certain lines, and it's used for different effects. Sometimes it can be like deep anguish. I think here it is just like, when you've got one of those ideas that you look at somebody and just go like, how are you not getting this? How are you not getting this? It's that type of feeling that he is, going beyond and doing. And, he's done it in a variety of ways in the past. So he has done it just with his straight up delivery like this, just screaming something in a mic. He has also utilized effects. There was one song on his last album where the entire 3 minutes were a very FX auto-tuned heavy version of himself. And it's almost painful to listen to, I think, like sonically. But again, it's one of those things that he's utilizing to create a picture in your mind, really. It didn't put me off, as I say. I think I come to this not expecting that, but I didn't hit it and just be like, this is something new.
Yeah, for me, I mean, like I said, mostly the song just passed me by, but that particular section I found a lot, especially because they do this on all over this album. There's a lot of really close miking. It sounds like it's inside your head, and when it comes to that section, it's a lot to take on. I'll put it like that. I think we're getting back on that kind of Marmite sort of thing. I think if you like what Hobo Johnson does and you're used to this kind of thing, you're probably going to really like that section. Again, for me, Marmite kind of thing. But I just wanted to see what you thought about that, whether that was something you did usually, or because it's quite a brave thing to do with such a close miking technique. I feel there's a lot of nuance in your vocal coming out there, a lot of strain, a lot of like pitches you might not want to listen to back. So so it particularly stood out to me.
I'll say he's improved on the close miking. There is one track on his first album, when that was, self-recorded, self-produced, everything like that. I think it's the closing track on that one where there is just a pop which takes out like half a second of vocals because he is that close to it when he is delivering that there. But yeah, so I mean lyrically, on My Therapist, on the face of it, you are getting a lot of these ideas of democratic socialism and community ownership and things like that, which are being espoused here. That is new for Hobo Johnson, and he's been very open about this in the press releases and things. I think he tweeted at the I think it's the Democratic Socialist Party in America, just like, hey guys, listen to my album. It's all about your stuff. But yeah, it's very new for him. I think there is again some double entendre at play here. I can't help but think that the therapist may also represent, again, his time with a major label. My therapist thinks my ideas are great. I think it's because he gets paid. And, it just makes you wonder, I think, about the motivation you can pull from that line. Does the therapist think that his ideas are great because he's paid to be there and just not along? Or is it a dig at an apathetic, well-paid class of people in America who are happy to espouse and agree with ideas but are reluctant to take action, i.e. buy the pizza place, give it back to the employees once you've made your money back, things like that. But yeah, it's very different ground lyrically for Hobo Johnson versus where he has been before.
I just to go back to the delivery on those kind of bits, I think it kind of works, and I think even with the close miking, it kind of works, and I think it adds to like the big dynamic shifts. And I know for me personally, there are moments where I have wanted to scream into a mic like that. 2016, most of 2016 would be a moment where, I would want to scream into a mic like that. So I think emotionally charged is something that applies here, and it not maybe supposed to be nice to listen to or the nicest thing to listen to, but it is like frustration boiling over, and that slight discomfort you're experiencing kind of embodies that, I think. So for me, I think that works.
I get that fully. It's just for me, it's just a very Marmite kind of thing. Don't get me wrong. I love kind of passionately screamed vocals. Most prominent example I can think of was Nirvana. We all grew up Nirvana fans, right? And Kurt Cobain does that kind of thing all the time. Big Drink, Billy Corgan fan, and he does a very screechy, high pitched vocal a lot. I think it's his voice. I just don't think it's for me. And I think when he does that kind of thing, it kind of grates on me. I think some people feel that way, some people won't. You guys obviously didn't. That's what's cool about music, man. We all had we talk about one little section from one song, and I never want to hear it again, and you guys are cool with it, and you can hear the emotional charged resonance in it, which is fine, which is what it's all about, right?
No doubt. No doubt. So let's move on to the 5th track on the album here. This is Jordan's House, named after the home of the Lovemakers keyboardist Jordan Moore. And so when I first listened to this album, it was about when I hit this track that I was wavering on whether I should have you guys listening to this album or not. I maybe thought we'd get further in than we did. But I am still glad that we are doing this stream totally, by the way. So I am very keen to hear your thoughts on Jordan's House. Cam, I know it's one that you brought up pre-show, actually. So let's start with you.
Just going to talk about music, get that out of the way. First of all, it's kind of this one riff acoustic guitar style beat with no drums. All the rhythms come from the vocal. They're tighter here. There's less of a loose feel and more of a kind of tight cadence, which is cool. He's mixing it up. I don't really understand what this song's about. I'm not gonna lie. Didn't know who Jordan was. Probably should have looked it up. Doesn't sound like it was that hard to find out who Jordan was, and he's obviously part of his canon, part of his band. I think losing that didn't do a lot for me. Again, I just want to say his vocals are really consistent, very close up and center fine, but the closeness of it is quite quite prominent, and we've heard that a few times throughout the weeks now. And I wonder if that's kind of that live and in front of you kind of thing is really in vogue at the moment. Because I'm hearing it more and more, and I'm used to like really spacey, reverby vocals. I don't know if that's saying something about the type of music I usually listen to, but yeah, it's really up close. Like I said a minute ago, it feels like it's in your brain. I can't really say a lot about this because I didn't really understand what this song was about. And the music's all kind of like the same throughout. It's quite a cool beat. And I respect that he changed it up a bit throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I would just going back to music, I agree. It's another fairly simple, straightforward, especially chord progression. Again, not like a huge amount of variation throughout the song, but again, it's all about the lyric here. I actually found this song really interesting. I quite like this one. I think it is the contrast between that like really repetitive and monotonous kind of beat and this slight like fever dream that he seems to be going through about his trip to Jordan's house. I think it's just an interesting contrast, and the way that the way I read it anyway, it kind of feels like he is on this kind of slightly delusional trip to Jordan's house, but to him it seems like the most normal thing in the world, and it's kind of grounded by that really like basic kind of rhythm. I think there's like maybe a couple of moments where the vocal delivery kind of escalates a bit, but again, it feels like it's something that seems normal to him that Jordan's gonna be like, what the fuck?
The grounding point, I think, is where I'm at. I took it a slightly different way. I think for me, it's a song that seems to be about a safe space in your life, right? Whether it's Jordan's house or elsewhere that you go to physically or mentally when you feel like you are losing your fucking mind and ready to ask someone, can't you see what all the implications mean? Jordan, God is dead, but I am alive at Jordan's house. And yeah, this is the first track, I think, on the album where we get a little more of the personal anxieties of Frank himself. Usually doesn't take until track 5 on one of his albums for that to come through, which I just wanted to make sure that noted here. Brad, I'm kind of with you. It was utilizing the music to paint a picture, I think, or help paint this picture, and have a backdrop. The lyrics mention very normal things that you can get caught up in these types of moments, like seeing a single car, be it here, I think it was a Mitsubishi Eclipse. You maybe should be conscious of Mitsubishi drivers, but that's just my personal opinion. But you can get caught up looking in your rearview mirror, seeing the same car over and over, just like, am I being followed here? Like, what the fuck? When it's just like, it's somebody driving home. They went to get some milk. Like, come on, man. World's not about you. And yeah, I think this is a track that if it came up on shuffle, I probably would end up skipping over. That's not unique for Hobo Johnson songs that I enjoy. There's a number of skits and things that he has done previously that on my first listen, I'm just like, this is really cool. I want to never listen to it again. And Jordan's house may well be one of those. It's probably down to that repetition, etc. there.
So I was quite about that. I thought this is one of the ones, like Brad said, where he's mixed it up a bit more. There's something new he's doing here. I find him a lot less annoying than I found him previously. Sorry, annoying's not the right way to phrase that. I mean, you know what I mean. I find him a lot more sort of, his vocal in particular, a lot more tolerable here. And I really like that repetition giving the rhythm. I think it was a very deliberate choice not to. Well, obviously it's a deliberate choice not to use drums because there's no drums on it. But you know what I mean. It was a very much a smart choice to let the rhythm come through that vocal and that repetitive Jordan's house, and the way that the rest of the vocal is delivered, and not have the drums on it. I thought that was quite a cool song. Again, I think you lose a little bit if you don't know who Jordan is because you don't necessarily think of that space. I thought it was another kind of. Is he sort of talking about American imperialism again here for some reason? I'm not really sure what he's talking about. So I think now knowing who Jordan is, this song makes a lot more sense to me. I think it's one of the highlights of the album. I'm reticent to say that, but it's sort of one of the better points for me.
So I think just one thing that I'm maybe interested in that, did you ever feel like because you had this interest in this song that you wanted to go out and find out who Jordan is at any point?
It didn't occur to me that it would be easily accessible information like Jordan was his keyboard player or whoever it was you said is a keyboard player.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It didn't occur to me that it would be someone like that. He very much feels like, to me, would write about someone that you don't have a clue who they are, and then you know, they're just someone he knows. It's like, you know, if I released an album, I was like, oh, Dave. You know, Dave's not a person that the audience knows. It's just someone I know called Dave. So it kind of felt like it was probably going to be that. So I didn't really feel like I needed, probably, you know, could have just Googled the name of his band just to check, but it just didn't occur to me to do that because it just felt that way, that he would just be using someone he knew from his life in a kind of, you don't know who they are, but that doesn't really matter kind of thing. I figured fans of his band might know who Jordan was beforehand because he might have referenced him previously, and I wasn't going to kind of dig back deep enough to kind of find out who Jordan was at that point.
No, fair enough. And you know, I just want to make clear it's not a criticism. I'm just generally curious because I think there is a lot of Hobo Johnson's music that you will hear something referenced. And granted, he does a lot of that reference to, you know, names and people that you potentially don't know. Often they have been covered in previous songs, or they have painted he has painted a picture of them elsewhere, or interviews, things like that. So I know when I first started getting into him, there was a lot of just like, who's this person, or what is this, or what is this concept, or whatever. You know, I went and checked that out. But I was just curious again, as you know, somebody coming to Hobo Johnson now, whether that was the case. Cool. Right. So let's move on to our 6th track on this album. And yeah, here we go then, folks. After nearly 80 years, we finally have the long-awaited prequel to George Orwell's Animal Farm. It turns out Hobo Johnson was the one entrusted with building upon the canon all along. In all seriousness, I'm not entirely sure whether I've actually read Animal Farm before, nor have I seen the film adaptation. Both things I probably should have done by this point, but I have sat through lectures on the 1917 Russian Revolution. I think I have a grasp on some of the beats, so I might be all right. Brad, what are you thinking here?
Oh man, I thought I was going to get away with being the one that hadn't read Animal Farm.
Kim, do you want to? You were shaking your head when I was saying that. I'm sorry to pull away from you here, Brad, but do you want to just give us some quick hits?
Is Animal Farm the one with the pig that needs to like learn how to shepherd sheep? Is that Animal Farm?
Is that Babe?
Might be Babe.
Are you talking about Animal House?
I think I might be
Robot
getting Babe the
House.
sheep pig confused with Animal Farm. Oh, he's the little talking pig, and he has to learn how to shepherd. Like the farmer don't want to shoot him. That's not Animal Farm.
Good news.
Pretty
So
sure
you've even got it, and you've
I've
never
got a
read
copy
it.
right here. It's not my copy. I can read the back cover if that'll help us.
Yeah, do it. Let's
All
get a
right.
gist of what this is about. We really should have looked this up, considering the song is called
Mr.
Prequel to Animal Farm.
Mr. Jones of Manor Farm is so lazy and drunken that one day he forgets to feed his livestock. The ensuing rebellion under the leadership of the pigs Napoleon and Snowball leads to the animals taking over the farm. Vowing to eliminate the terrible inequities of the farmyard, the renamed Animal Farm is organized to benefit all who walk on four legs. But as time passes, the ideals of the rebellion are corrupted, then forgotten, and something new and unexpected emerges. I think the original title, or one of the original descriptions of Animal Farm, it's like Animal Farm, a satire. And it is Orwell's take, written from the 40s, about, it's loosely based on the Russian Revolution. When, you know,
It's not super far away from Babe the Sheep Pig, then.
Lala Kukalala's up here in chat, saying, educating us for one. I should have looked at chat before I grabbed the book, but Animal Farm is the no hierarchy, but they make their own. It is not Babe.
Yeah, I think as well the end kind of ends with the pigs becoming everything that they originally hated about the farmers in the first place, and end up kind of like acting exactly the same way.
Lala
But yeah.
Kukalala says correct. Well done, Brad. 1 point to you.
Yes.
Cam,
Oh, we're doing University Challenge now.
explain 1984,
This is
Cam.
not a university challenge level discussion, just to be clear.
Well,
Oh,
no,
hold on. Can one of you, Cam, can you buzz in for a second?
Is
Cam,
that what...
I did a I did a visual gag. You can check that on the edit. Anyway, sorry. We've gone well off the rails here. Does somebody
What
want
was
to?
my question? 1984.
Yeah.
I've listened to the audiobook of it. I've never read it.
Somebody talk to me about this song. Somebody talk to me about prequel to Animal Farm.
Is
Now
that
that
the
we've
one
gotten
with,
away, now that we've gotten beyond our understanding of some source materials.
basically there's this guy and he lives in this no Brad.
Um, so Animal Farm aside, I think you can kind of get the gist listening to the track. I feel like it's a very relatable song. I feel like everyone has been in this situation. I think again, it's kind of got a naivety about it. It feels like it's being told as a children's story. Um, that's kind of reinforced by some like really simple instrumentation, some more loose guitar playing. Even like the xylophone kind of feels like it's being told to a child as like a cautionary tale, almost in a way, which I find quite interesting. Um, Again, there's some more kind of use of texture here, which is interesting and stuff we've not had in previous songs. Especially we get to the line, and at work he grits his teeth, and there's like mournful like pad guitar sound that kind of envelops you. Um, so I think there's some interesting use of texture here. Vocal delivery is again probably more relaxed. There's not like there's some obviously there's some meaning in the lyrics, but not like the emotionally charged screaming that we've had before. Yeah.
I kind of prefer this album when his band is singing, honestly. The melodies that they present in this song are kind of, for me, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more palatable than kind of what he's doing. Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything, but they're really good. You got the kind of repetitive acoustic guitar again, and you probably could have made one complete song from the amount of one riff songs in this on this album. But it's fine. I'm cool with the kind of long repetitive sections. It works nicely. It builds really nicely. It's got that little kind of synth coming in and the melody in the background. Some of the choruses as well, which is again really nice. Glad you're here to say that it kind of is this childlike thing, because again, to me, it came across as quite vague. Um, didn't really want to say too much about the lyrics because I've not read Animal Farm and I don't know what Animal Farm's about fully, as has been completely and utterly demonstrated in the last 5 minutes. So I didn't want to say that, but it felt vague. It didn't really feel like it was saying too much again. But again, could be the childlike thing, could be that I don't understand Animal Farm. So
I think it's interesting you picked up on the backing vocals as well, because I felt like they could have possibly expanded on what he was saying a bit more than they did here, rather than just kind of repeating. I still think they sound great, but yeah, I thought they could have like maybe not always just repeated
yeah,
verbatim.
no doubt that there's more places they could have gone with them, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary to fit with the song. Do you know, it isn't like we're listening to kind of Saint Vincent where you've got all that room to kind of do all these like wild, expansive backing vocals. I feel like they really suit the song what they're doing here, which is a skill in itself. Right to what is there, not right to what you can do. Because I'm sure one of them can shred, and that just really wouldn't have fit here. So
Yeah, it is kind of deliberately simple. I think. Yeah, I think that works for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. This is one of the lovelier, I think, sounding songs on the album, and so much of that, Cam, as you've said, is down to the Lovemakers, who have been delivering this throughout this album. A lot of that is, as you say, the great group vocals. They add so much texture, and yeah, Frank's vocal delivery. I'm gonna say tonally, and I think for a lot of the rest of this album as well. Now, we're kind of through the breaking in period that I think we had with his new sounding voice that we were talking about on I Want to See the World. This is a lot closer to how he has sounded before. And this exhausted, exasperated vibe, which we're going to get for a couple of tracks in a row here, now is something that he has utilized before. Life isn't perfect or just something better out there is a must. I think, a good line considering the sentiment it possesses. I think it's interesting because, when you were talking earlier about the rhyming dictionary aspect and, everything else, I was thinking about, hey, I've written this note down about this line. I really enjoyed how they managed to get that sentiment, rearrange it into a way that it was going to fit into this little rhyming couplet, and it didn't feel too ham-fisted to me. It didn't feel too wonky, anything like that. It worked out quite nicely. And yeah, this is a song that is capable of evoking emotion, I would suggest. As with much of this album, I am on board with a lot of the high-level concepts that Frank exposes, though I expect if we were to have a debate, we might differ on the solutions. So it may undermine the total impact on me here. But yeah, you've both spoken about the naivety and things like that. I do find it very interesting that he's sticking to the classic type texts or big thinkers or big ideas on this album, right? Animal Farm, it's a book everybody owns. They may not have read it. Karl Marx, right? The biggest name in left thinking that there is. And he was referenced in the press release for this album. I'm looking forward to him digging deeper, I think, into some of the motivations and some of the literature if he continues down this path, if this is where Frank's music is going more generally.
And if it is, I'd like to see him get a lot deeper with it. It feels strange to me kind of having these big ideas and having these big kind of themes are not really ever going beyond surface level. But hey, we've gone through that enough times. It's probably just his style.
Yeah, and it's again, this is if Frank had written songs about masturbation and things like that on his previous albums, you could, or he'd written more about masturbation on his previous albums. You could say this was his American Idiot type change in direction, right? It's not on that level or anything like that, but I think Green Day were a fantastic moment in time there. If you look back at some of the detail that they go on to, with American Idiot, again, it was very place and time. I still think it's incredibly strong today.
Yeah,
let's not get that twisted in what I'm trying to say here. But, there is something about, I think, transitioning from a songwriter who is dealing with very apolitical things to dealing with political things. And sometimes that detail comes in time.
Yeah, I think they're the perfect example to bring up because I love Dookie, one of my favorite albums of all time, and it's an album about jacking off. Let's not put any bones to it. That's what that album's about. And yet, when they come to American Idiot and they try to tackle these themes, from my opinion, maybe the first time, maybe they touched on it previously in a few spots. But there's so much more depth to all those lyrics, right? There's so much more you can garner from them. It took me, obviously the album came out as a child, but it took me until I was well into my adult to understand a lot of the lyrical themes that were fully going on there. I understood George Bush bad, but beyond that, I didn't really understand a lot of what else was happening.
That's not this song. That's a couple of songs away.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? So, I mean, for me, like, that's a great example of that transition and the depth required to really bring those themes across. And I just don't. I'm not saying he hasn't got it in him, but just I just feel like when you're trying to touch on these things, you need to have that little bit of depth. I just don't think he has it here in a lot of places.
Cool. So, now let's move on to the next track. I think I've made some allusions this evening to some very personal frustrations about the content of this album. Not because I think that the subject matter Frank is focusing on this time around is unworthy. And I'm, again, most certainly not suggesting that he should stay away from politics in his music in the way that a lot of Instagram comments and, posts on Reddit have been suggesting this week. I think it is in places commendable and well done. But, this is rather my selfish frustration that I so often come to Hobo Johnson albums for my heart to be shattered into 1,000 pieces, for the sense of catharsis that feeling brings, rather than the grief tourism, I should probably say. But boy, does You Want a Baby make up for all the waiting to this point, for me. The track starts with a Hobo Johnson hallmark, starting a song, making a mistake, restarting. He does it a lot live, and here he does it on the Tiny Desk as well, actually, now that I think about it. But, it underlines here just how much this song sticks in his throat. And, for the man who closed his last album with I Want a Dog, a song that fantasized about his future family and the good and idealized version of that family would bring, and has so regularly written about wanting to have children. He's mentioned it in passing on this album earlier. To then write this impassioned message to Alex explaining how he has reassessed and simply cannot bring a child into this world because of its fragilities and because of his own fragilities is devastating. This hit me harder than anything else on this album. What was your guys' assessment of this track?
Didn't really hit me hard, I can't say that, but I do think some of the smarter writing on this album is on this track. Not everywhere, but there's a couple of lines that make me feel like he's got a bit more potential than he's kind of showing here. So particularly like the lines, "My genes make me struggle, why would I pass that off to you?" I think that's not a nice line, obviously, but it's a kind of thought you have when you're in that kind of state of mind. So I thought that was cool. Not cool, but again, you know what I mean. So I thought that was interesting. Again, without knowing him too well, it's kind of hard to garner much from this because you don't know about his relationship, his past relationships, everything you've just basically been telling us about, without really knowing him or his work previously. So it's again another example of this album being hard to come to if you're not a fan of Hobo Johnson, and yet somehow alienating to his fans. Which I find bizarre because I don't understand why, if you liked his previous record, you wouldn't enjoy this. But anyway, that aside, I think the main takeaway from me in the song is this extremely close-up vocals, and they're too close-up, in my opinion. Just purely because there's quite a lot of unpleasant nuances in his voice that really come out in this mix. A lot of mouth sound, a lot of vocals coming out of his throat. I find it kind of harsh and kind of off-putting to anything else. I get that might be a deliberate effect. To me, it just didn't sound very nice and enjoyable. There's not really a lot else going on. Again, some very basic acoustic guitar, not a lot of other instrumental things happening. I'm all for these stripped back songs. You know I love a stripped back song. I either don't think he's a good enough vocalist to perform that way, or don't enjoy his vocals enough to want to listen to him perform that way. So it's quite difficult in that regard. But again, I think some of the smartest writing on the album, I can't criticize him there.
I think it's probably a very deliberate effect that you get those mouth sounds and you get those throat sounds. It is supposed to be intimate, and like you say, Matt, it's kind of an open letter here. Even the guitar recording is super close up. You can hear the chair creaking. You can hear like every brush of fingers against the strings. And it works with the lyrics for me. Definitely one of the more kind of hard hitting ones, as you said, Matt. And I think that like super up close, even if it is slightly claustrophobic or slightly uncomfortable kind of sound, there's no way that's not what they were going for. You don't like his voice, that's like we've established that. So yeah, it's not going to work for you if you don't like his voice. But you can't throw any kind of shade on the encapsulation of the idea through the way it's recorded, because
No,
it's
no,
exactly what they were
sorry.
going for. I would guess.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I did think it was a deliberate thing. And again, I'll go back. It's brave to let yourself be recorded raw, vulnerably like that. Um, it really has to come down to whether you like the vocal performance or not, or you like the vocalist as to whether you're going to enjoy something like that. Which is why I don't want to be too critical of it, because as I've established a long time, I particularly enjoy his voice. But I can see a lot of why someone would enjoy this. It's very kind of raw, stripped back, a lot of space, a lot of heart, a lot of emotion in it. It's just it falls down on that one point for me, which is unfortunate, really.
So, there is a beep or an alarm or something that is picked up at some point in this song. And, I know he's spoken about laying tracks on iPhones in the past. I'm not sure whether he did that on this album. But, I like these elements being in there. I like the creaking of the chair. I like this style of vocal, particularly for this song, because, he has always delivered his more impactful songs as live in the past, right? February, I always get it wrong. It's February 15th. February 15th was a track on his last album. That was actually just a straight up live recording. I think it was interesting as well that you were saying earlier that you associate that up close and censor style with with a live performance, because I think so much of his music tries to evoke that as live feeling, which is a space where he excels, for sure. And on a track like this, it adds, with the imperfections, that level of honesty and personality that I seek in something like this. It is the vulnerability, it is the imperfections in Hobo Johnson that I think draw me to his music and draw me to him as a person. Even if, I was to say, if you took this type of style outside of this music or applied it to a different artist, it wouldn't fall down. I think it's all of these aspects working together in a symbiosis make it something that I love. I love this song. It's deep, it's thoughtful, it's laden in beautiful sadness. It's everything I want from a Hobo Johnson song. And I'm going to add, I don't mean to make you cry, but I might one day, to the list of Hobo Johnson quotes that I've got sitting away somewhere that just cuts straight to the deepest fears of my life.
Oh boy.
It's what his music is, man. It's what his music is for me.
Matt is talking about when he finally reveals that he hates the Smashing Pumpkins to you, Cameron.
I know he doesn't. It's fine.
Man, Gojira, they really just never get beyond the surface level of these issues, espousing big ideas. No, I'm kidding.
It's fine. I mean, you could say that about Gojira. That's a fair criticism to level at Gojira, I feel. They are French, so, is in English as their second language, not having problems with French.
There goes our whale posting cred.
Because our French audience, we're going to get banned by Macron now.
You got through I Want to See the World, which actually referenced, wanting to visit France. So, I thought you were safe, but obviously not. It just all came out anyway. All came out.
There was nothing wrong with those Frenchies, as Hobo Johnson would put it.
And fuck, dude, I really like their sodas. Cool. So let's get moving.
Let's just avoid all talk of visiting France for further streams, please, because it's giving me flashbacks.
Well, I got good news for you, Brad. We're starting to close in on the end of this album at this point, and thusly we are beginning to, get closer to a time where we cannot reference Friends anymore. This whole album clocks in at under 30 minutes by the end of it, and we are already on track 8. You Need Help. What do you think of You Need Help, Brad?
So something very familiar about the kind of guitar part here. At first I kind of thought it reminded me of Park Life. I can see Cameron nodding, so maybe I'm not a million miles away. But yeah, more like acoustic strum guitar, big boomy kick, tambourine, some of that great gang chanty kind of backing we've got again. Another 4-chord progression. I don't think we've ever really moved beyond that, like musically in this album. It's kind of a theme. It's obviously a comfort zone, and it's obviously there to provide a backdrop to, him. Some more interesting musical elements that come in through this one. I just want to say about the kind of chorusy moments where like the overdriven guitar tone does come through on this album. It sounds so good. That driven guitar set, the driven guitar tone, it's just really like that sound. I think that sounds great. There's some slide guitar coming through here, which is something we've not yet heard. Some more catchy kind of nars. And yeah, it's another kind of messy one. It doesn't feel too formulaic, even though we've had a lot of the same formula. I think it just about manages to avoid being too similar all the way forwards. I think that's because you do kind of get taken out of it by the vocals. Again, another kind of catchy hook here. So musically, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, can't disagree really with anything you said. I was starting to feel like the beats on this album were getting a little bit too repetitive, and that was the thing that was really keeping me listening to it. And then they obviously change it up here. It's a lot more up tempo, it's a lot more upbeat, and it's a really nice change of pace, especially considering the previous song. More nice backing vocals. Could probably do without ever hearing a gang vocal again in my life, because I feel like they're a little overused on this album, which is, far and away not one of the biggest problems I have with it. It's pretty much the same vibe, really, that we've got throughout the rest of the album lyrically and as far as Frank's concerned. Like the Na 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 section, it's a catchy song. I can't really say too much else about it. I don't think there's much more you can say about it. It's a nice, catchy kind of pop song. It's quite up tempo, and there's some good backing vocals and overall decent vocals on it. Didn't hate the song by any means.
There is one moment on this song where it drops to kind of some percussion and some like talking going on in the background, and what I can only describe as something that reminds me of Cameron's Pavarotti impression. I don't know if you picked that out at all, but I'm not going to make you do it on stream.
There's a very particular story behind my Pavarotti impression that we should maybe not talk about on stream. Bolts, yeah, that's not good. There involves some pigeons and Amsterdam, so that's as far as I'll go.
My favorite part about that is the fact that you were just censored by the robo gods when you were saying that as well. So it's just like, doesn't matter. You could have said whatever and it would have been fine.
Nice.
I think it might have actually been a passing Mitsubishi driving that.
Told you. Be careful. Be careful.
No, I just want to say, Brad, you're not a million miles off from Park Life with this one. I heard it too. It's it's. I think it's because it's got that kind of rhythm, hasn't it? It's got that part, that kind of thing. So I think it's got that kind of thing to it, which I don't think musically anything other about it sounds like Park Life, but it's got that kind of that feel and that vibe.
Group vocals, call and response. Let's talk about it. You've both mentioned it here. It was very late on, or when I was listening to this album, that I clocked the call and response might be playing a slightly different role, or might be playing a wider role, I think, in the context of what it's delivering on this album, right? Um, First verse, they're answering a lot of questions, and actually, that was something that happened back on Anton LaVey as well. Usually, they are repeating something that Frank has said. And Hobo Johnson has been quite happy to ask rhetorical questions in the past, but seems determined for the Love Makers to answer them a lot on this album. So I think there is something at play there. Either way, it sounds gorgeous. And we had a song that dealt with a lot of the themes that you get on "You Need Help" back on the Dry Cleaning album. We discussed way back in our early days. I can't remember whether it was the case there, but here we get the darkness of dealing with depression set against some more upbeat, jammy music that had disappeared, I think, over the last few tracks on this album. I realize maybe haven't mentioned too much, but a lot of this is the playoff between, what do you pick? Do you pick medication? Do you pick depression? Either way, you're going to feel like shit, and it's going to it's going to depersonify yourself. That's not a word, but I'm not getting closer to the word, so I'm just going to say that. I could pick out a bunch of lines from the second verse, but it's like you're about to fucking cry, but then a witch casts a spell on your eye, and now you're stuck feeling like this all day. That might be my favorite.
I just want to say one last thing about this song before we move on. Did anybody else see the title and get Kings of Convenience kind of PTSD?
At the end of the first verse, Hobo Johnson says, "Man, I think I need help." And, I sat there.
Kings of Convenience for help.
I wondered how many people have come to this conclusion after, throwing the same questions back and forth over lockdown. And yeah, like you say, it's an important message to deliver. If you're feeling depressed about it and you can't get out of it, ask for help.
I will say I actually prefer his lyrics on this album to this particular song, to the Kings of Convenience. It's the only time that will ever happen in the existence of these two artists, but I think he wins out on this particular asking for help.
It's happening. I'm done. I'm drawing a line under it there, and we are moving on to song 9.
Have we just found a title for the video, which is not a team building exercise?
I'm gonna write that down, Brad. I'm gonna write that down. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's fair to call song 9 brackets "The Government's Not Great" our closing track, though it's followed by another on this album that is unashamedly an outro, including in its name. Cam, I was going to ask you what you were feeling about song 9, but you've disappeared, so I will instead ask Brad.
Yeah, weird that I got Blur vibes from the last track and not this one. Yeah, the government's not great. So lyrically, it's kind of going with that like very simplistic look at things on a surface level, at least. Musically, what we've been led to expect. Some more great examples of big dynamic shifts throughout this track. I think there's something that comes through really well on the album, and I think a lot of that is to do with the really close miking and the really intimate sound that you get, like just how massive the shift from like one guitar, one vocalist to all of the Love Makers kind of surrounding you and playing at you. Some more kind of synthy parts coming in here. Guitar solo. Is this the first guitar solo we've had? This is like towards the outro now. Kind of basic pentatonic kind of vibe that then leads right into this really obviously dodgy, like major scale rundown that like someone's given someone who's not the guitarist the guitar and they've played the outro. Yeah, lots of talk about ripping out eyes. It's the other thing.
So I think it's just worth me saying at this point that this track again bears a lot of the hallmarks of Frank's previous music. He's utilized callbacks to other songs heavily in previous albums. And I think just about every song on the album gets a mention here. Ripping Out Your Eyes was something that was first mentioned on I Want to See the World. Anton LaVey also makes an appearance on this track, as do Demands to Buy This Soap. Exactly right. Jordan's House, 7 days a week. We got the whole gang. We got the whole gang here, Cam. And I know how much you enjoyed this album to this point. So did you enjoy everything coming back at you in one song?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say it's sort of like a callback song. There's a lot of callback lyrics to previous songs, and whether that be regarding to him feeling like he's pretty fucked, Jordan's house, or the fact that he wants you to buy his soap in the most convoluted metaphor I think I've ever heard. Yeah, that's really what this song is about. The chorus instrumental again, really good. The synth and the drumming on this album have been really consistent and really good. And I kind of just feel again I want to ignore him and listen to his band. I really do. The synths are oddly not so in your face and on the nose, which is kind of the antithesis to how I feel about the rest of this album. And I feel that that's a really strong standout part. And I would like to see this band write music possibly outside of the sphere of Hobo Johnson, just to see what that's like, and just to see if it's something that I mean, I really enjoyed some of the instrumentals on this. A lot of kind of 90s alternative inspired stuff, and that for me was again what time and again kept me being able to kind of come back to this. So I would like to hear that, but I mean, I don't think he was particularly bad on this track. Still, having said that. But yeah, there's a lot of callback. It's not all you can say. It just felt like every line was I'm going to reference a different song. And interestingly, he, like myself, wants to rip out the eyes of the guy from the 1975. So, or 21 Pilots. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah. So either or. To be honest,
It's
as far as I'm
both
concerned.
actually.
It's
both as
both,
well.
right? Yeah. So yeah, no, I've got no problems with that. I'm fully on board with that sentiment. Obviously not gonna rip out their eyes, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, all good.
There's another thing that features quite regularly on Hobo Johnson albums, in addition to callbacks, and that is the inevitable boiling over of frustrations culminating in these strange scream shouted sections of vocals. We've spoken about that. But more often than not, there is one track on his album that just becomes a cacophony of noise. I think it's been quite restrained musically compared to his back catalog to this point. So when it arrives, it's very welcome. For me, I can point to so many examples of Hobo Johnson songs that invoke a feeling of sensory overload. And we had to wait a while, but it came here on this album. But equally, it's very easy to vibe along to this song. Very solid consistently. There's one line that's like almost snuck in talking about, everybody is locked in. I don't do so well locked in. It hides away within the callbacks. It's like thrown in at the end of the second verse, and it's one of those lines that he delivers, very faintly, almost mumbled. Frank's spoken in the past about, how all of his albums are a time and place things. They are very motivated by the emotions or the environment that he is in when he is recording them, and you can see it for sure. I think on his first on the last two albums to this point. So it's interesting that again on your effective closer is when you get a reference to this album being recorded in lockdown, and how that has most certainly, I think, contributed to some of his feelings. What's happened over the last 15 months, probably a little bit later, sort of the summer of last year as well, has driven a lot of the feelings that he has written about on this record. I thought that was just interesting little thing that's thrown in right at the end. Great. Let's move on to our actual closer outro. I mentioned earlier, Hobo Johnson has a history of breaking down fourth walls in music. He closed Rise of Hobo Johnson with a monologue thanking everybody for buying the record and about how the music business had sent him insane. So whilst outro's pseudo film credits vibe is different compared to the albums we've had in previous weeks, it's not left field for him. Is there anything you guys want to talk about here?
I just want to say that I feel like this is the best song on the album, and it strongly reminded me of "Wannabe" by the Spice Girls, which I enjoyed greatly.
I was gonna say this wouldn't feel that out of place on an Eminem album. Funny because you brought that up earlier, but that kind of off the wall, like breaking down the fourth wall kind of vibe that you've spoken about, Matt. The fact that the music kind of sounds like something bought from music library, and the narrator sounds like some guy that you've hired from Fiverr. Yeah. I also messaged Cameron saying, "Do we have to talk about outro?" When I obviously should have messaged you, Matt, instead.
Well, it's better to just leave it as a surprise for yourself, right? What I'm going to just throw in here, I mean, the trumpet fanfare at the start has featured on... the trumpet fanfare was featured on Fall of Hobo Johnson. And, again, he couldn't make his way through an album without referencing his previous one musically. This is something that's happened before. I think it's worth noting that rather than delivering the thanks himself this time around, he chose somebody else, be it Fiverr Guy, to deliver that thanks to his fans along with other messages this time. Not sure if there's anything in that, but still thought it was interesting. Do we want to get a bonus second review of his next album, Hobo Johnson Alienates His Fan Base, in here? Track by track. What's the AQI of this bong rip? All I see is poop. Drake diss? No.
That Drake diss was... I want to hear that because it sounded pretty good.
I don't know enough about Pusha T, but I liked the I liked the one-liner there. That was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I actually enjoyed this as a thing. I thought it's quite funny in a lot of places, and honestly, that dun 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 dun, dun really reminded me of the Spice Girls. I just wasn't expecting it. Proper caught me off guard. Really fun. Nice way to end an album. Kind of felt like a skit that you'd get in a lot of hip hop, but unusual to have it as the closer and only in one place. So yeah, it was fun.
Hobo Johnson alienates Cam.
Yeah. He has alienated his fan base as well. But yes, folks, let's just leave it on an important message here. You should know the air quality index of your bong ribs. That's a smart thing to do. Right, let's move up onto our sum up chat then. Cam, why don't you get us started this week?
I don't really have a lot to say because I think you know pretty much how I feel about this. I feel like there's a lot of great music on it. He just really doesn't do it for me as a performer, as a vocalist, as a lyricist. I don't want to say I couldn't wait to not listen to this again, but I certainly don't want to listen to it again, so it's not going to go on my regular rotation.
That was very short and sweet. I think there are some great moments in this. I think the dynamic shifts are really great. Stuff you don't hear a lot of pop music coming through, like the really intimate and imperfect performances that you've talked about, Matt. I do feel like you would get more out of this if you followed Hobo Johnson a bit more than I do. And I think that's come through from what you were saying, Matt. And I think that also kind of plays into some of my criticisms about the more naive or the more like simplistic lyrical content, even though in some places I do think it's done for effect. Don't think there's anything really that grabs me musically. I feel like most of the songs follow a very similar kind of pattern in that way, which I get is kind of part of the hip hop aesthetic. I don't think it's going to make it into my rotation, but I wouldn't be averse to listening to another album just to kind of see where it goes next.
we've touched on it a little bit here and there, but this album has been lambasted by his fans on the internet since its release. His subreddit, his Insta comments, his Twitter replies, they're all a total shit show right now. And Cam, you even, I think, mentioned this earlier. If I'm being honest, I really don't get why. I mean, I do to an extent, because this album presents a pretty large shift in the music and lyrics of Hobo Johnson. And, people do fucking hate it when an artist that they love evolves. But you know what? I enjoyed witnessing the evolution of this album. I really did. The fall of Hobo Johnson never really stuck with me in the way that it did with many others. And I just don't think that big label style was really conducive to his best music. I didn't go back to that album that much, and if I'm being honest, I may not come back to the Revenge of Hobo Johnson much. There is a clunkiness in places that I still haven't made my mind up on, and a lot of it hasn't caught me in the way that You Want a Baby did. And I think I've laid out in detail why that is here tonight. I come to Hobo Johnson for some specific things and some specific feelings, etc. But God, if this album doesn't present a wonderful picture of the potential future for Hobo Johnson, he's suggested in the past that he may quit music early, but I really hope he's got another in him to see where he can go from here. I started by saying it, I'll end by saying it tonight. I fucking love Hobo Johnson's music, and nothing about that has changed. Revenge may not be in my regular rotation, but I'm going to see him live when he's back over here next year. And God damn it, I mean, Cam, even you, I would still try and drag you along to that show. Because
I was just gonna say,
it's something that needs to be witnessed. It really is. He comes alive in those settings, and even if you don't enjoy it, I think it might help you build an understanding about what I've spoken about here tonight.
Oh no, I'll probably come see him with you just because I don't turn down a live show very often, regardless of who it is. But I get why people like him to a degree. I just think I can't get past his vocal and lyrical style, which is pretty much most of what he's up offering, right? And again, like you said, I find it deeply, deeply odd. And although I agree with his fans' opinion of this album for the most part, I find it deeply odd that they hate it so much because it doesn't sound that wildly different to anything he's presented before. But people will be people, and people will react certain ways to certain things, and I don't really understand it. But there you go.
It's discernibly different from, I think, what he's done before, and change scares people.
I don't think it's different enough, though. Do you know? It's not like he suddenly just released a metalcore album or something like that. It still very much feels like Hobo Johnson in his style.
I hope
that I want to hear.
I hope I've demonstrated tonight why this is such a radical shift in his music and what he's doing, and what I think. What I won't speak for other people, but what I come to Hobo Johnson for. I'm not going to run over that ground again because we're going to be running tight on time here. But I still think this is quite a radical change for him musically and lyrically coming to this point. So, good news.
Just for bonus points, we're also only 2 Hobo Johnson albums away from a full Star Wars saga. We just need Attack of the Hobo Johnson and The Hobo Johnson Strikes Back, and then we'll be there.
I said he needs at least another one. I'm changing that. He needs another 2. He needs another 2. But hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull the album art down right now, and we are leaving Revenge of Hobo Johnson behind us. What are we looking ahead to next week?
Wasn't a huge amount that caught my attention this week. So there was an album I listened to earlier by a band called Snapped Ankles. They are a London-based post-punk band incorporating elements of performance art and art rock, and also under a label called Krautrock, which is German for cosmic music. I don't really know too much about that, but apparently it's like Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, and stuff like that. I listened to it earlier. I really enjoyed it. Not sure if you guys will as much as I did, because it's yeah, don't know, maybe you won't. But there's a couple of other ones. There's a Laura, I always say her name wrong, but it's Mvula. It's like Mvula. She's kind of like a soul singer, a bit jazzy, kind of that sort of stuff. So that might be fun. Might be more at Brad Street. And then there's another one. What was it called? The Go Team, I think they were called. I sent you through earlier.
Yep.
I don't know if you listened to them. They are an English six-piece band from Brighton and combine indie rock, garage rock with a mixture of funk and Bollywood soundtracks, double Dutch chants, and old school hip hop. I listened to that again earlier. Found it a little bit irritating, but you know, it's not all up to me. So I think those are probably the best three to go with.
Let's not irritate Cam 2 weeks in a row.
Please. Do a rerun of Van Weezer next week. So, what are you guys feeling out of those three?
I'm feeling the Laura Mvula
Laura and Villa?
personally.
Works for me. Cool.
Sweet.
Lauren Vula next week. Let's do it. Let's start listening, and we will be back then to speak about it. And I think we are just about at wrap up time here. So if you are with us live here on Twitch, stick around as after we say goodbye for a little post-stream fun. And if you missed any of this discussion or want to hear it again, we'll have a recorded version of this going up on our YouTube channel next Sunday. If you're watching that recorded version, then we'll be going live again next Friday at 8 p.m. GMT for another album discussion. Once again, we have had a change of background, but I'm still going to shout out Millie Draws a lot on Instagram. That's spelt with a Y for our logo. If you want more Hobo Johnson, then head over to www.hobojohnson.com. And if you want more Ballpark music, then follow us on Twitch, subscribe to us, and hit the bell on YouTube. And check out our link tree. That's at /Ballpark Music UK, where you can find all of our socials. Cam, did you enjoy it tonight?
I always enjoy hanging out with you guys.
And Brad, how about you? Good evening and talk.
Yeah, it was a fun one. It's better when we don't all agree.
Yeah, I agree. Better discussions. Piss me off more often. You two are too happy. I'm the one that hates everything.
I feel like you say that every week, Brad. Like every week in the video, you're just like, yeah, it's better when we don't agree. But hey, look, I have had a lot of fun. I'm glad that we could talk through a Hobo Johnson album. I won't put you through it again. And we will see you all next time. Stay safe.